Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation? The podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have Natalie Born. Natalie Born is from Atlanta, Georgia. She is an innovation facilitator, consultant, author, keynote speaker, and the host of the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Prior to founding Innovation Meets Leadership, Natalie held roles as a VP of Innovation, Territory Global, and Senior Vice President of Business Development at a MarTech firm. Natalie has collaborated on 2 approved U.S. patents and has over 20 years of experience leading product development, UI/UX, web development, and strategy and marketing teams. She has worked with organizations such as Career Builder, First Data, IHG, and ADP, leading major initiatives in over 18 countries. Natalie is married to Aaron, and they have 2 daughters. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Hey, Jared, thanks so much for having me, and I'm really excited to connect with your audience today.
Fantastic. Well, let's do that. Let's dive right in. What, in your mind, is innovation?
Yes, innovation is the ability to surface patterns and monetize them, right? It's the ability to create something that has never been created before. It's the ability to launch new things that have never been thought of. And I think that's what makes the space of innovation so exciting.
I couldn't agree more. Patterns. Tell me more about patterns and why that's so core to your definition of innovation.
Yeah, so I know that there are a million different ways to approach innovation, so many different ways to do it. And if you are just brilliant and you sit around every day and have 100 ideas, like, congratulations, you're awesome. But I got to tell you, I'm not that brilliant. So how I surface and monetize patterns is by talking to customers. And there's something phenomenal about sitting across from a customer and them telling you what they love about your product and what they hate about your product. And if you have enough of those conversations, eventually you're going to find somebody, right? You're going to find a 10 or 15 conversations where you start to see patterns emerge. If you can take that pattern that you're seeing, and then you can begin to create some ideas around that pattern and begin to present that to your client, and you start to see people nodding their head and saying, yeah, that's interesting. That's something that I would pay for. That's something that's urgent to me. And not only would I pay for it, I'd like to have that now. So that urgency is there. When you start to see those things, that's when you know you're headed towards something new and something innovative.
I see. So the patterns come from sort of the knowledge creation in the consumer connection portion of things. So when you talk about patterns, you're talking about insights from the customer or the stakeholders that you're serving.
Absolutely. And so, Jared, my product development career, one of the ways that I approach innovation is spending as much time as I can with the customer. I believe there's so much wisdom in what the customer does and doesn't do when they're using your product. There's so much wisdom in just watching someone use your product. Sometimes they start to use it in even unintended ways that you weren't expecting them to use the product to get around just normal daily problems that they're trying to solve. And so innovation should always surface, right, problems that people are having and solve it for them so that their life can be better, simpler, easier. And so to me, that's why I get so passionate about innovation, because it has the ability to solve everyday problems that sometimes we just keep walking past and we don't even realize that there's a whole door behind what our customers are doing, that if we begin to lean into that, we can start to see, okay, I've talked to 10 customers now. Our product doesn't solve this problem, but guess what? There's no other product in the market that does either. So their ideas now become my next innovation.
Right. I love that approach because it puts the problem to be solved in the center, not the solution you have at the moment.
That's right.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of teams get stuck on, well, I have this widget in my hand and I spent 2 years developing this widget, and the feedback you get from the consumer is filtered through the 2 years of hard work and sleepless nights that you've put into the thing in your hand.
That's right.
And that's why I love that approach of starting with the customer, talking with the customer, understanding what problem they're trying to solve, and working back so that you don't end up with a lens or a filter that doesn't advance the solution.
That's right. And you are spot on. One of the problems that I find often is we fall in love with our solution and we don't fall in love with helping the customer solve their problems. And so if we can fall in love with helping the customer solve their problem, that's how we monetize ideas. When I think about the career that I kind of grew up in, just product development, oftentimes the products that never saw the light of day, or maybe we tried to launch it, but we lost a ton of money on it, was all because it was our brainchild, right? That we thought of in an incubation setting and we never talked to a customer. And so if we're not solving customers' problems, oftentimes we're not really creating the right solutions for the market. And so what I like to do is take a napkin sketch to the customer and I say, hey, I'm thinking about building this thing, this widget, and here are 5 sketches of what that widget might do. Here's the value proposition for what the widget is and how it will actually move the market. Now, let me ask you a question. Would you buy this widget? And the best thing a customer can say to me is, I hate that. I would not buy that, because I've spent time in low resolution, not high resolution, where I spent a ton of designers' time and money. I've spent a ton of developers' time and money. I'm in a napkin sketch situation where I'm just going back and forth asking questions. And so often we fall in love with our solution and we don't fall in love with the customer's problem.
That's so true. Well said. I think the other nugget you're highlighting there that I think is critical is highlighting the value proposition as early as possible and not talking about features, talking about benefits. People want to talk about how many bells are on it, how many whistles it has, and all these other things, but starting to communicate the benefit as early as possible. Here's what I think it will do for you. Here's what problem I think it will solve for you.
That's right.
And is this a solution you're willing to hire to solve that problem? And if so, at what rate?
Yeah.
And I feel like the other thing that was great is you can get a yes. Would you buy this? Yes. But the no's are so much more rich.
That's right.
And articulate and distinctive in terms of what doesn't work. When people like things, we're really very inarticulate about why we like it.
That's right.
But when we don't, it's you're going to get some specifics.
It's visceral, right?
Yeah,
it's visceral when we don't like something. I can think about a client that she was one of my favorite clients because she would just shoot straight. She had so much candor in her. She just couldn't help herself. And that's why I loved anytime I had any product, I would take it to her first because I knew she would shoot straight with me. And I remember just pitching this product to her and she was like, I hate this product. And I was like, it's that moment where somebody calls your baby ugly. And I just leaned in and I said, tell me why you hate it. And she spent 30 minutes just walking through why she hated it. And there were actually a lot of valid points. And there were actually things I could solve for her by going back to the drawing board on the product. So I sat there and I asked her this. I said, hey, if I solve these problems, will you buy this product? And she said, yes. And so what was so crazy about that day is not only did I walk out the door with the product that we needed to build, but I had $100,000 deal on the table if I fixed those issues for her. And I wasn't even in sales at the time.
Right.
And so just the idea that we should be working hand in hand with our customer to build what they want, not throwing it over the wall at them and hoping they like it. And so one of the things that I used to tell the product development teams that I ran is if you can't talk to at least 10 customers a month or several customers, let's call it 25 customers a quarter, then you may be in the wrong field. Because if we're not staying in lockstep with the desires and the wants, the needs of our customer, we're missing the mark.
It's so true. And such a critical step. And it's so easy to overlook, especially in this era of digital product management and other things. It's easy to sit in a room in front of a screen with code and do something that you think is brilliant and forget to check and make sure it solves a problem for someone along the way.
Right.
And I really appreciate that example of the conversation because it also highlights the modern opportunity for authenticity. I think 40 years ago, when people made products, they had to come out. It had to be this big reveal. It had to be this amazing finished thing. But our modern world favors authenticity over perfection and pace over polish. And I think that's something that conversation highlights is You don't have to wait to connect with your customer until you have a viable, perfect, polished product.
Mhm.
And that's when I trip over all the time.
Absolutely. And I try to tell people, like, if you're holding on to your idea until it's perfect, you've probably missed your moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because part of innovation is understanding that perfection will kill our ability to release the value to the market quickly. And so if we want to release value quickly, we have to kill the idea that something has to be perfect. There is no perfect. That's why in innovation we iterate, right?
Right.
That's the whole idea of iteration and why that's such a valuable component to me, because it allows us to get some things out while we iterate in the background.
Mm.
And oftentimes the thing that we think people care about, we realize that they didn't even want or they don't use. And so sometimes even just allowing ourselves to iterate, we're actually able to pull innovations forward, features forward, ideas forward that we didn't even know people wanted or needed. Maybe they didn't know either until they started using our product.
Right, right. There's an art to that. I don't want to oversimplify it. It's not like you can just grab your napkin and head out the door and start asking people if they'd buy what you sketched on it.
Right.
There's an art to it, and it requires experience. It requires time, effort. It requires a lot of no's, a lot of hard conversations. But it is a skill that you can develop, the ability to engage prospects and customers in a manner that makes your product better. But it is a skill set.
That's right.
When you talk about innovation consultants, what does an innovation consultant do? I think that's part of that core skill set that gets underappreciated sometimes,
Mhm.
because if the consumer is going to tell me what they like, I can just go ask the consumer. You could. But I think that's a key piece of this process and this
Mhm.
approach is knowing not just what to ask, but what to put in front of someone, knowing when you've got enough on the page
Yeah.
to have a productive conversation. And that's why that value focus you talked about is so critical. If you're focused on value, I think that takes a lot of the complexity off the table.
That's spot on. And there's kind of twofold to that too.
Mm.
Oftentimes we think we need to go external only, but there's so much wisdom that lies in our internal teams too. So that innovation approach, right, with an innovation consultant, they can help you internally surface ideas,
Mhm.
internally surface challenges. Some of the people I love talking to internally in an organization are the people on the front line who answer the customer service calls every day,
Oh,
and the salespeople who are in the market, right, getting
yes.
hit in the face, right, with their competitor or whoever else is out there. And so those two people groups will also help you surface so much goodness in what you're trying to build. And so, yes, 100% go talk to your customer, but there's a lot of truth also that's going to lie within your organization, a lot of gold
Mm.
that's going to help you launch and build what you're wanting to build as well.
And I would imagine that applies to the value chain as well,
Mhm.
where the customer has an important piece of the puzzle externally. I would imagine suppliers and other partners and folks along the value chain might also be able to help you innovate more effectively.
Absolutely. And that's something we don't talk about enough, which is that value chain and how, if you'll sit down, which again, this is also a surprise, as in most organizations, they haven't sat down and mapped out that value chain.
Mm.
Once you do that, you can actually surface innovation along that entire value chain, which is again, a whole nother level of how we think about innovation. I think most people think about innovation as you're on a whiteboard or maybe you're in a room with a bunch of developers, but we don't think about looking at a value chain and then going out and
Mhm.
engaging each of the people that are touched by that value chain. And so there is so much ability, ideas to be surfaced that are all within that value chain as well. And I love that you mentioned that because that's a really missed component of how we can go about deriving innovation out of whatever we've delivered.
Yeah, I spent 5 years of my career in that portion of the innovation process, working with suppliers and external vendors and helping them plug into our innovation process and helping our innovation process extract value from them as partners.
Mhm.
The first step in those relationships was always trying to move from a transactional relationship to a collaborative one.
Mhm.
Even though the financial value flows in one direction, making it a more reciprocal partner like process is critical for all of the external players.
Mhm.
And what you were describing is that sort of partnership approach with prospects and customers. And I think just shifting the mindset from we know and you don't to let's figure this out together.
That's right.
Is really important.
Yeah. To me, and that's why I love the napkin sketch, because there's something about coming with a full-fledged prototype or even a full-fledged product where the customer feels like, oh, you're done. So you actually don't want my opinion, and I can't push back because I don't want to hurt your feelings because you spent 3 years on this and now you're putting it in front of me.
Yes.
But that low resolution sketch says, I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to give and take. I'm willing to hear what you have to say. I'm willing to allow this thing to evolve. And so that's the whole point of even how do you go from napkin sketch to prototype to product, right? You have to have these stair steps along the way, because the more complete that thing looks, the less likely people are to give you feedback, because now it's a thing, right? And they don't want to hurt your feelings about that thing.
Right. Exactly. And you're going to get less nuanced feedback. You're going to get, no, I don't like that finished vacuum cleaner. Not, oh, you should move that hose over here.
Right.
Or you forgot this attachment or whatever. So just change that in this little sketch.
Right.
I think you're exactly right. Those insights on finished products, it's just a whole different type of conversation. So we've talked a lot about what innovation is, patterns that surround it, the stakeholders that need to be involved. What isn't innovation?
So to me, innovation isn't creativity. So when I think about innovation and creativity, they're both required, right, for you to be effective. But to me, I see them very differently. To me, creativity is working with what already exists, and innovation is building what doesn't exist, right? Something that has never been done before, where creativity is something that you have 10 things on the table and you're just going to be creative about how to merge those 10 things together, but you're not necessarily creating something net new. And that's different, right? Because oftentimes we find that those words just merge into the same lane and everyone says innovation and creativity kind of simultaneously. But I really do believe that they're different skill sets, they're different abilities, they're different tools in your tool belt, and separating them helps us to really understand which lane we're operating in. And again, based on what problem we're trying to solve, what lane do we need to operate in?
Do you see them as separate, innovation and creativity? Do you see them as one is a subset of the other or one is a component of the other?
It can be. I've seen people who are super innovative, but they're not creative. The other hand, I've seen people who are super creative, but I would never call on them for innovation. And so I do see them almost like if you have a tool belt, I see innovation might be a saw and, creativity might be a hammer.
Got it.
I see them as different skill sets that we can call on, and they help us in different ways. I mean, typically when we think of creativity, our brain goes to all of our artsy friends, right? The people who can write, the people who do poetry, the people who can paint. I mean, that's literally how we think about creativity. And I believe it's much broader than that. But innovation to me is a different lane. And it's a lane that not a lot of people are able to effectively sit in, because it is a skill to be developed. It is something. And again, even when you get into that whole realm of innovation, right, there's different types of innovators. Like I mentioned earlier, there's people who can sit down and think of 20 different ideas and they're just super brilliant. And you're like, what planet do you live on? But then there's other people who have a systematic approach that absolutely works for them. My form of innovation, I have to talk to people in order to hear what their problems are. That's how I like to personally surface innovation, by getting out in the market, having conversations, listening for patterns. So within the innovation wheelhouse, to me, there's so many different ways you can approach it. Same with creativity. I could see creativity maybe sitting up underneath innovation, but I think it has enough legs of its own that it can sit on its own and just be a different skill set that people can bring to the table.
That makes a lot of sense. I love the analogy of the saw versus the hammer, the different tools in the toolkit. And I think the different forms of innovation you outlined have different relation to creativity, the process-driven, methodical approach. I think people think less about bringing creativity into that, for better or worse, right? And
that's right.
I think the sort of inspired genius that can sit down and come up with a lot of different things, sometimes creativity is part of the label we put on that. Oh, they're a very creative thinker, or they're
Right.
creative in the way they approach things.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to your distinction is helpful because I think the difference you're highlighting is value.
Mm-hmm.
And innovation has value on the other end of it.
Yes.
Whether it's a stage-gated multi-step process, whether it's a eureka moment,
Mm-hmm.
it creates value.
Right.
And creativity creates value in a stakeholder-driven sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a creative pursuit can be valuable to the person creating it, but it's a much more subjective form of value.
Yes. Think about a painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I can look at the same painting. We can both agree it's creative, but you may like it and I may dislike it. And it's subjective to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, when innovation hits the market, we know it, we feel it, and it creates that downstream impact and value, not only for the company, for the customer, but for the market.
Mm.
And so that's, to me, the difference. You've articulated even better than I could, but that's, to me, that's the difference. And I think they're different tools, they're different skill sets. Both are required and needed for the journey ahead. Both are important to grow, but I see them as separate tools.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that separation is important so that you can get better at the individual skills.
Mm-hmm.
If you see them as synonymous and you're trying to get better at it, you're getting better at one and worse at the other without consciously knowing it. So as we talk about creativity, it kind of brings to mind a question I like to ask about hobbies. So when you're not innovating and helping others innovate, what keeps you busy?
Wow. I'm probably the worst person to ask about hobbies. But, I guess, I would say right now my hobby is my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you work in a high demand industry or high demand role, you make your hobby centered around the people you want to spend time with. And so that really has been, in this season, what it's been for me is just finding intentional time to spend with my kids, my family, and just enjoying them and enjoying the journey that they're on. I have a middle schooler, which we all know how middle school was when we went through it. And then,
yes.
And then I have an 8-year-old as well. So it just keeps me busy, and it's exciting just to kind of jump into their world when I'm not working on innovation topics.
Oh, I'm sure that's rewarding and keeps you on your toes at the same time. I can only imagine. As we've talked about what innovation is and what it isn't, what are some of the experiences that have sort of shaped your approach to innovation over the course of your career? Yeah,
I love that question. Some of the experiences that have shaped my just vantage point on innovation is I started working at a .com when I was 19. I thought, as soon as I graduate, I'll go get a real job. And I ended up staying there for 11 years. And I would say that they created my core foundation for innovation, because what I saw in that environment, you actually don't see in many environments. And that's the ability to fail fast, fail cheap, fail small. And then the fact that they actually helped you fail forward, learn from your mistakes, get up, try it again, try it from a different angle. Oftentimes when you think about innovation, right, it's this big, scary thing that costs a lot of money and it's arduous and only the smartest people can work on it. And what I loved about working in this organization for over 11 years is they democratized innovation and they made it something that was available to everyone. And so we had so many different ways that we could express innovation. We had business plan competitions. We had hackathons, which most people are familiar with, right?
Yeah.
Stay up all night with your Red Bull and pizza and you knock something out, get it done. We had customer competitions where we'd actually invite our customers to pitch innovative ideas to us.
Wow.
But we found 5 or 6 different ways to pull innovation in so that it wasn't a department that owned innovation. It wasn't a person that owned innovation. They were able to get everyone in the organization to believe wholeheartedly that they owned innovation. And so that is my upbringing. That's what, kind of launched me into my career. So when I started at that company, when I was 19, I was answering customer service calls. And when I left the company, I was over US product development, handling about $780 million in products. And so how could you go from call center to product development director? Because people invested in you, they trusted you, they allowed you to fail in a safe environment. You absolutely had to learn from that.
Right.
They didn't want you to make the same failure twice,
Right.
but they allowed you to grow, and they didn't put lids or limitations on your development. And so that really has been my anchor point for how I approach innovation and how I'd like to help teams and companies approach it, because there's something powerful about lifting the lid off your people and getting them to feel like they own innovation. When they don't feel like they own it, they go do a side hustle, right? They go work on it on the side, and hopefully one day they launch a company out of it.
Right.
But when you get them bought into the vision of the organization, and you get your employees believing that you believe in them, they'll scale walls for you, right? They'll jump over mountains. And so this whole idea that innovation can be infused into people, infused into a whole organization, is so powerful and so impactful. And it is, for me, forever changed the way that I approach innovation, even in my own career.
That's a great story and a great example. It sounds like an amazing environment. Quite a career you built there. Is there an approach you kind of take to, as you think about your experience and as you're working with your clients, talking with young people coming up through the business, is there advice that you would have for innovators or people who want to get into the world of innovation?
Yeah, I mean, here's what advice I would give to anyone who wants to get into the space of innovation. Step one is you have to be in an innovative environment. Now, some organizations are inherently innovative. There are even pockets, right, in organizations that are inherently innovative.
Right.
Even if your organization overall is not innovative, find one of those pockets and get in close with the right people to help you grow, to help you learn. And I would say, if you're in an organization that's adverse to innovation or adverse to allow you to touch innovation, you need to find a different organization that's going to allow you to be exposed to many, many different projects, to many different customers, to many different things. When I look back early on my career, we were growing so fast during that .com boom before the bust happened that most of us were being promoted every 12 to 18 months. So we were moving up through the ranks and we were moving into different roles constantly. And what that afforded us was, one, to know that if we knocked it out of the park in this role, we had another one waiting in a year.
Right.
But it also afforded us the opportunity to know that we needed to be around people who were thinking differently, who were thinking outside the box, who were pushing the boundaries within their own career. And so the biggest thing I think we all forget is, no matter what age or stage we're at in life, is we need a guide. We need someone that's 5-10 years ahead of us that's saying, hey, this is true north. This is what I'm reading. This is what I'm absorbing right now. And we need to try to get around that and absorb those types of things too. So I have a few people that I mentor in the product development space, and I'm constantly encouraging them to take their seat at the table, to pitch ideas, to let people know that you're interested in innovation, that it's something that's exciting to you, and get in the right rooms with the right people so that you can grow and that they'll invest in you. And that's a lot of what I saw in my career. It's people just taking me under their wing at different times and investing in me. It makes all the difference in the world.
Well said. It's so important. Those pockets are hard to identify sometimes. And I'm so glad you brought up the pockets, because it's easy to identify innovative companies from the outside, but feel like you're not in an innovative company on the inside. But sometimes you just have to look a little more closely.
That's right.
And you were in an innovative company, and that translated to advancement. Sometimes when you're in a company that's not innovative, the innovative pocket might be a place for growth, but not necessarily advancement.
That's right.
And you have to kind of consider the trade-offs that come with that. And there's so much wisdom in your advice there. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Natalie Born, thank you so much for your time. Your work in this space is fantastic. And I'd love it if you'd share where we could learn more from you, or other places we can connect with.
Absolutely, Jared. Thank you for having me. This has been such a blast. I've enjoyed this. You can follow me at Innovation Meets Leadership on almost every platform. I just released a book called Set It on Fire, The Art of Innovation. So I would love for you to go and check that out at setitonfire.co. And yeah, you can follow me on almost every platform. And my website is innovationmeetsleadership.com. Again, Jared, this has been fantastic. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at OutlastLLC. OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.